Francis Flynn has this quote about human behavior that it just completely reframes how we look at influence. He says, we are sheep. Our minds are not as independent as we like to think.
Which is a pretty big blow to the ego, right? I mean, we all want to think we're these totally rational, independent thinkers.
Oh, absolutely. But, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are decoding the hidden psychological levers of persuasive communication. Because if you're listening to this, you are probably a learner. You're someone who's always looking for that edge, a way to understand the unseen gears turning in the background of human interaction.
Yeah, and to figure out how really subtle tweaks in language can just radically change how people behave. It's fascinating.
It really is. We spend our whole lives pitching projects or trying to lead teams, assuming everyone is just operating purely on logic.
But to actually become a more effective persuader, you have to kind of put that ego aside. You have to accept the foundational premise of behavioral psychology, which is that human beings are fundamentally flock animals.
Which means we really need to understand the rules of the pasture. Like, if we're operating on the premise that our minds function like a flock of sheep, what are the invisible fences keeping everyone together?
Well, those invisible fences are built by what psychologists call normative behavior. And normative simply refers to the informal rules and expectations that are just socially enforced all around us.
So it's basically peer pressure, but on a subconscious level.
Exactly. Our brains are cognitive misers. They want to save energy. So instead of analyzing every single choice from scratch, the brain just takes a shortcut.
Right, you just look around.
Yeah, you look around, you see your colleagues or neighbors doing a certain thing, and you automatically assume, well, that behavior is acceptable. It's prevalent, so it must be the safe standard to follow.
It is the ultimate processing shortcut. And the opposite of that, which Francis Flynn's research highlights, is deviant behavior, which is, departing from those accepted social standards.
Precisely. And from an evolutionary standpoint, deviant behavior was bad news. Standing out from the flock usually meant you were the easiest target for a predator.
So conforming isn't just a nice preference, it's a survival mechanism.
Right. We are biologically wired to fear standing alone. It's deeply ingrained.
I always associate that dynamic with, middle school fashion trends.
Oh, totally. The absolute worst place to stand out.
Right. Like one day, nobody is wearing a certain brand of sneakers, and the next day, if you aren't wearing them, you're engaging in deviant behavior just by putting on your old shoes.
The playground logic is ruthless.
It is. But what's fascinating, and honestly slightly terrifying, is that adult decision-making in these high-stakes corporate environments operates on that exact same playground logic.
Oh, the flock is just wearing suits now. That's the only difference.
Exactly. The mechanism just gets better at hiding itself behind professional jargon.
Yeah, like when a board of directors decides to adopt some new strategic framework just because, all the top tech firms are doing it. That is literally the corporate equivalent of wanting the cool sneakers.
Social proof just completely bypassing their analytical filters. Okay, let's unpack this. Because my gut instinct as a manager would be to leverage that survival instinct by pointing to the biggest crowd possible.
Like saying, everyone in the world is doing this, so you should too.
Yeah, exactly. If I want my team to adopt a new software, I might say, hey, 50 million people are using this platform. But I imagine the human brain has some sort of defense mechanism against broad comparisons like that.
It absolutely does. And this is where the nuance of Flynn's research really shines. That broad, everybody's doing it approach usually fails miserably.
Because of selective normative influence, right?
Yes, people don't just follow any random crowd. They are heavily biased toward following a crowd of people who are remarkably similar to them.
Because if you just say everybody, my ego immediately steps in and goes, well, everybody isn't me. I'm unique. My workflow is unique. My situation is completely different.
That is the exact psychological shield the brain deploys. It wants an out. So to bypass it, you have to point to a narrow, highly specific group that shares key characteristics with your target audience.
The more granular the similarity, the higher the persuasive power.
Exactly.
Francis Flynn brings up this brilliantly designed case study involving residential energy bills that perfectly illustrates this. I love this example.
That's a classic for a reason.
So if a utility company wants you to use less electricity, The traditional, ineffective method would be to put a chart on your bill showing how much energy the entire city uses, just asking you to do your part.
Which is way too broad. It gives the homeowner like a dozen different ways to rationalize why their usage is higher than the city average.
Right. They can just say, well, I have a bigger house or whatever. So instead, they redesigned the bill to compare the homeowner exclusively to their efficient neighbors.
And the granularity of the data they show the customer is just incredible.
It really is. The bill doesn't compare you to thousands of people. It says, we are comparing you to exactly 87 similar homes.
Wow.
Yeah, and it specifies that these 87 homes are within 4 miles of your house. And crucially, it notes that they also rely on gas heating.
What's fascinating here is the psychological trap this framing creates for the reader.
A trap. How so?
Well, by narrowing the comparison group so drastically, the communicator systematically dismantles the audience's ability to make excuses. You literally can't brush it off anymore.
Because they've accounted for everything.
Right. You can no longer say, oh, my house uses more energy because it's older, or the weather is different on this side of town, or, well, we use gas, so the metrics are skewed.
The bill totally corners you. It accounts for your heating type, the geography, the home size. You are suddenly faced with this undeniable reality that 87 people in your exact hyper-specific situation are just doing a better job than you are.
Yet you are suddenly the deviant one in a very specific flock. And that realization is profoundly motivating for people.
Thinking about how you, the listener, can use this in your daily work. Say you're trying to motivate a specific department, like your regional sales team.
You definitely shouldn't compare their quarterly performance to the entire industry.
Right. You shouldn't even compare them to the marketing team down the hall. You need to trigger that selective normative influence.
So you get hyper-specific.
Exactly. You tell them, the West Coast enterprise team, who has the exact same headcount, the exact same budget, and the same product line as us, is closing 20% more deals.
That is brilliant. It eliminates the our situation is different excuse before it can even be spoken.
Mm-hmm.
It forces a direct comparison that the brain just cannot comfortably ignore.
That hyper-specific framing works wonders when you are trying to push someone toward a positive action. But I'm really curious about the reverse engineering of this.
You mean when it goes wrong?
Yeah. What happens when you use that same normative pressure on a behavior you desperately want to stop?
Oh, man. That is where organizations constantly sabotage themselves.
Really? How?
Well, the golden rule of framing dictates that to encourage a behavior, you must show that it's normative and common. But to discourage a behavior, you must frame it as deviant and uncommon.
Okay, that makes sense.
But when communicators mix those two up, they accidentally weaponize the flock mentality against their own goals.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the research highlights a case study from the Petrified Forest National Park that shows how easily this can completely backfire.
Yeah, the park had a major problem with visitors pocketing pieces of the petrified wood and taking it home.
Just slowly carrying the park away in their pockets.
Exactly. So management decided to put up a warning sign to stop the theft. And their first attempt at this sign is a masterclass in what not to do.
So the original sign essentially read, many past visitors have removed the petrified wood from the park, changing the natural state of the forest. Wait, so my immediate thought reading that is, by loudly complaining about the sheer volume of thieves, didn't the park basically validate the theft?
Yes, they absolutely did.
They basically told everyone that stealing the wood is a totally normal thing to do.
They thought they were issuing this stern, moral warning about environmental damage. But human brains ignore the moralizing and latch right onto the social proof.
So the visitors read that sign, and their subconscious just processed it as, oh, many past visitors take a piece of wood. I guess that's just the standard souvenir you collect when you visit.
I better grab mine before the forest is empty. That's exactly how the brain works. By trying to guilt people, they accidentally framed the theft as a normative behavior.
And the data proves it backfired, right? The rate of wood theft actually increased after they installed that specific sign.
It did. They accidentally manufactured a flock of thieves.
But then they realized the structural flaw in their messaging, and they actually changed the sign.
Right, they swapped out the messaging to focus on the behavior they actually wanted to see. The new sign read, "The vast majority of past visitors have left the petrified wood in the park, preserving the natural state of the forest."
Notice how that completely removes the spotlight from the thieves.
Right.
By framing leaving the wood as the overwhelming norm-like. The thing that the vast majority do stealing is instantly recast as deviant behavior.
Exactly. If the vast majority leave the wood alone, then taking it makes you the weird outsider who doesn't understand the basic social rules.
And unsurprisingly, the rate of theft decreased.
It did. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of corporate environments, just think about how often managers replicate that first failed park sign.
Oh, all the time.
Imagine a meeting where a department head leans over the table and complains, "Listen, everyone, nobody is filling out their weekly compliance forms on time, and it is becoming a massive problem."
I have sat through that exact lecture. The manager thinks they're demanding accountability.
But psychologically, what they're actually doing is granting the entire room permission to keep ignoring the forms.
Because they just announced that skipping the paperwork is the normative behavior of the department.
Right. The employees here, nobody else is doing it either, so I am safe in the middle of the flock.
Wow. So to actually fix the problem using these psychological levers, the manager needs to frame the failure as deviant.
Yes. They should say something like, "I want to thank the 85% of this team who submit their compliance forms flawlessly every Friday. We just need to get those last few stragglers on board."
Oh, that completely flips the pressure. Now, if you haven't done your forms, you aren't part of a silent majority. You are a straggler holding everyone else back.
Exactly. It isolates the bad behavior. It makes it deviant.
So we know how to correctly frame our target audience using selective norms, and we know how to frame the behavior to avoid accidentally normalizing bad habits. But framing feels a bit, I don't know, passive. Like if I'm launching a new initiative, I don't just want passive agreement. I want immediate adoption. I need to introduce velocity to the equation.
Yes. This requires tapping into the psychological accelerator pedal, which is the combination of popularity and momentum.
Francis Flynn looks at the interface of a free music download site to explain this.
This is a great study.
Yeah, most platforms use static metrics to show popularity, like a star rating. Seeing that a song has 4.5 stars shows you that the flock generally likes it.
But this specific download interface went a step further. It didn't just show historical star ratings. It displayed real-time, rapidly updating total download counts right next to the tracks.
You could literally see the numbers jumping. The distinction between static popularity and real-time momentum is crucial for the brain, isn't it?
It is. A star rating might have been accumulated slowly over 5 years. It tells your brain what was a safe choice historically.
Right.
But a rapidly spinning download counter provides undeniable evidence of immediate momentum.
It creates an entirely different cognitive response. The data showed that users converged incredibly fast on the songs that displayed both popularity and a sudden sharp increase in adoption.
They just clustered right onto those tracks.
Why does the brain prioritize that velocity over the static long-term rating?
It really comes down to scarcity and the fear of missing out. Static popularity represents a stable environment. The flock is grazing peacefully.
Okay.
But velocity, seeing numbers tick up in real time, signals that the environment is shifting rapidly. The flock has suddenly started sprinting in a specific direction.
And your evolutionary instincts kicks in.
Exactly. It starts screaming that there must be a resource over there or a danger over here, and you need to move with them before the window of opportunity closes. Momentum triggers urgency in a way that archival data simply cannot.
Translating that to a business launch, if you roll out a new internal communications tool, telling your staff it is a highly rated platform, is static and honestly weak.
Right, nobody rushes to adopt that.
Yeah. Instead, you send an update that says, over 50 people in the marketing department have transitioned to this tool in just the last 48 hours.
Yes, you are combining selective, normative influence, comparing them to a specific department with the momentum of those 48 hours.
The psychological resistance to adopting that tool just plummets because nobody wants to be left standing alone in the old system.
It creates a powerful, self-sustaining bandwagon effect you want to jump on.
That sense of momentum is incredibly effective for moving a large group. But a moving train isn't always what you need.
What do you mean?
Well, what if you're dealing with a single point of failure, say a crisis or a tight deadline, where you urgently need one specific person to take a specific action? In those moments, that exact same flock mentality we've been discussing actually becomes your biggest enemy.
It really does. Because when you require individual action, the comfort of the flock paralyzes the individual.
This introduces the danger of the broadcast message and a psychological trap known as the diffusion of responsibility.
Which is often referred to as the bystander effect.
Right. A broadcast message is defined simply as any message delivered to more than one person. It's highly efficient for sharing information, but it is terribly unpersuasive when you actually need execution.
Because of that diffusion of responsibility. That occurs when people are in a situation that requires action, But because there are other witnesses present, they subconsciously assume someone else will handle it.
The sense of personal duty just divides itself among the crowd.
Exactly. If you ask one person for help, they feel 100% responsible. If you ask 10 people for help, each person only feels 10% responsible. Their internal monologue just says, oh, someone else is probably more qualified, or someone else has more free time to handle this.
So what does this all mean for us practically? Like, how do we bypass that diffusion?
The solution is a mechanism called individuation. You have to actively pull the person out of the flock. You have to address them individually and directly, making them the sole point of failure if the action isn't taken.
There is a perfect, albeit pretty intense, example of this from emergency responder training.
The CPR example, right?
Yeah. If someone collapses on a crowded sidewalk, your first instinct is usually to yell to the crowd, "Someone call 911."
Which is a broadcast message. And because of the diffusion of responsibility, the entire crowd might just stand there, with every single person assuming the guy next to them is already dialing the phone.
It's terrifying. So emergency responders are explicitly trained to avoid doing that. They don't yell to the air.
Right, they individuate.
They are trained to lock eyes, physically point at one specific person in the crowd and say, "Hey, you in the blue shirt wearing glasses, go call 911.
By identifying the blue shirt and the glasses, they have instantly individuated that bystander. They have destroyed the diffusion of responsibility.
That specific person can no longer assume someone else is going to make the call because the directive was assigned exclusively to them.
Their cognitive load shifts from passive observation to active individual accountability.
It is a stark example, but that exact same psychological failure happens every single day in the workplace.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about the absolute dread of the @channel Slack message.
Ugh, the worst.
Or the massive group email where someone asks, "Hey, can someone pull the Q3 data for the client presentation?"
And what happens next?
It is always just 2 days of complete silence.
Because everyone saw the notification, but everyone assumed that Dave in accounting or Sarah in operations was going to handle it.
It is the exact same bystander effect, just playing out over software instead of on a sidewalk. The responsibility was diluted across the entire channel.
So if you actually need that data, you have to individuate. You send a direct one-on-one message. Sarah, can you pull the Q3 data by noon?
But the research also addresses a really practical challenge here. Sometimes you have no choice but to communicate with a group.
That's true.
If you're leading a team meeting or giving a presentation, you can't always just walk around the room and direct message one person at a time. How do you introduce individuation when you're forced to use a broadcast medium?
Francis Flynn offers a highly effective tactic for group settings. When you are wrapping up a meeting, like after you have presented a new initiative or a set of recommended actions, you don't just say, all right, everyone, let's get out there and get this done.
Right, because that's a broadcast message that will result in zero action.
Exactly. Instead, you ask the people in the room to pair up right then and there and discuss with their partner exactly how they personally plan to follow through on the recommendations.
Oh, that's clever. By doing that, you are forcing them to verbalize a personal commitment. They have to translate the broad company goal into their own specific task.
And by telling their partner, they are removing their ability to hide in the flock. They are making themselves publicly accountable to another human being.
In 3 minutes, you've successfully turned a room full of passive bystanders into a room full of active, individuated participants.
It takes the efficiency of a broadcast message and forces it to carry the weight of a one-on-one commitment.
This entire deep dive really fundamentally shifts how we should look at emails, public signs, and meetings. If you are listening, let's quickly recap this core toolkit we've unpacked today.
Sounds good.
First, remember the biological reality. We are sheep. To effectively persuade that flock, you need to use selective normative influence. Do not compare apples to oranges. Compare apples to incredibly similar apples.
Right. Remember that 87 similar homes within a 4-mile radius with gas heating eliminate the audience's ability to say, well, my situation is different.
Second, audit your framing carefully. Never normalize the bad behavior you are trying to stop. Remember the Petrified Forest.
Frame the positive behavior as the vast majority and isolate the negative behavior as deviant. Don't build a flock of thieves.
Third, if you need fast action, engineer momentum. Don't rely on static popularity to make your case. Combine social proof with a real-time sense of velocity to trigger that evolutionary urgency.
Get people jumping on the bandwagon before it leaves without them.
And finally, when you absolutely need a specific action executed, break the trance. Use individuation to defeat the bystander effect. Point to the person in the blue shirt or send the direct message instead of the group blast.
This raises an important question, though. A question that really lingers after you process how mechanical all of these psychological levers actually are.
What's that?
If the research is accurate, if our minds are truly not as independent as we pride ourselves on being, and our daily actions are so easily swayed by whether our hyper-specific neighbor uses gas heating or whether a stranger in a park stole a piece of wood,
Yeah.
how many of our deeply held daily habits are actually our own independent choices? And how many are just the result of a perfectly crafted, invisible normative nudge that we never even noticed?
Wow. That is something for you to ponder on your own as you navigate your week. Are we driving our own decisions, or are we just following a flock that was expertly framed for us? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. I highly encourage you to look closely at the broadcast messages, the corporate emails, and the warning signs you encounter in the world today.
Once you understand the psychology behind them, you really start seeing the invisible fences everywhere.